Hello and welcome back to Paranormal NL Podcast. That's P&L Podcast for short. I'm your host, Jen Noseworthy. Tonight we're doing a Season 3 2025 bonus episode number 9. I have our guest tonight from Florida backstage warming up, who'll bring on stage shortly. Yes, I'm happy to announce that P&L Podcast is now on UPRN, United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and 105.3 FM Gulf Coast Live on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with a live chat. You can also listen to P&L Podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Pocket Cast, and the YouTube Paranormal NL Bog Team channel. Now, let's send a few prayers out to California, to the folks dealing with the wildfires, and a few warm hugs to the people way down south in the snow, and an inauguration day new president nod in the USA. Also, a huge shout out to the official P&L Boots on the Ground Bog Team music in the background, made by Bog Team member Robert Dumond. I'll turn it up a little bit so you can hear it there. Now, Mr. Robert Dumond, he is a Bog Team member, and the new Bog Team Music metal version drops this Friday night at midnight and all music streaming platforms. You can pre-order it now. Robert Dumond also makes the P&L Podcast and Bog Team official logos for our merch, which is available on TeePublic. Check out Robert Dumond on Season 1, Episode 28, and Season 2, Episode 151, with his Devil's Toy Box, and follow him on IMDb. Now it's time to pull up your cozy chair, grab a nice cold one, and listen in to Paranormal NL Podcast, or maybe I should say a nice warm one tonight. It's pretty cold out there. It's a place where the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, and anywhere else in the world can share their paranormal experiences. PNL Podcast also believes in supporting international people, places, and things to promote paranormal tourism and paranormal global networking. A big thank you again to all the P&L Podcast alumni guests from Season 1, 2, and 3, and of course our fans. We want to hear your stories. Do you have any paranormal, UFO, metaphysical, cryptid creatures, vampires, folklore, historical, books, or just tales of the weird you'd like to share as a guest on my P&L Podcast? Please reach out to me on our P&L Podcast Facebook group, Instagram, YouTube channel, or Gmail at paranormal.nl.podcast@gmail.com. Remember, after your episode, you'll become part of the P&L Podcast Alumni Network. Make sure you click on that bell, like and subscribe, and follow along on whatever platform you're listening in on to get updates for new episodes. And head on over to Facebook and join our group, Paranormal NL Podcast, in the Bog Team Facebook group. It's the official place to hang out in a fun and safe space. Find upcoming new P&L episodes in the featured section of the group. Now let's get on with the show. Tonight we have, all the way from Florida, Keith Evans. Keith, welcome.
Thanks.
Hey, Keith, now hold up your book there. Keith is an author. He's the author of 2 books. Right now, he's holding up his Vampires Dead or Alive. How about that Hayes House? You got that book handy?
No, it's I can run and get it.
I've got it handy right here. I'll throw it up on stage. There you are right there, and there's your books.
Right,
do you want to talk a little bit about yourself before we delve into your books?
Sure.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about yourself. I know you're way over there in Florida, and I hear you got a bit of snow.
Yeah, we got about 1 inch of snow combined with ice last night, and the electricity was going off and on since about 10 p.m. last night, and it finally went off for good around 2 or 3 a.m. And it came back on this morning about 11 a.m. So it was out for about 7 or 8 hours. Yeah, it's cold for Florida. I guess it got down to maybe the upper 20s last night.
Yeah, I think the whole eastern seaboard got knocked, didn't we?
Yeah, from Texas over to Florida and up Georgia, North Carolina. So
Yeah, my
everybody got
brother in Austin,
all right.
Texas, said they got a lot of snow down there too, and some friends down in deep South Texas. But let's switch gears and talk a little bit more about yourself now. You're also Army retired reservist?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you for serving. And you're also a forensic scientist? Chemistry is your specialty, I
Retired.
do believe? Retired,
Yes.
yeah. Interesting, interesting. Did you wanna talk a little bit about any of those before we delve into your books?
Probably not. I'd rather talk about the book.
Okay, I was, wondering, when you did those things, did you come across anything paranormal? Is that what got you into it, or was it more, something else that happened that got
No,
you
I got me
interested?
in. What got me into paranormal was when I was 4 years old. One of my relatives, older relatives, had lived in a house that the Franklin family had lived in since probably about 1850. And the last Franklin family member who lived there was probably up until 1975 or 76 when she passed away. And it was a house that had some really nice, I guess you'd call it wainscoting, which is
Oh, nice,
like up to
okay.
like the back of a chair level. So if your chair hits the wall, it doesn't harm it. And it seemed like it was in the dining room. So I always loved looking at it. It was very shiny wood. It either was varnished or had some type of oil on it that made it, kept it from dry rotting. And you could see the beautiful wooden grain. And as a 4 year old, I always made over that. And, I asked my mother, well, why does this wood make me so happy? And she thought I was a little disturbed for a 4 year old liking, you know, the wooden grain. But what I think I was doing was feeling my past relatives who had passed away. I was feeling the joy and the pride that that part of the house brought to them because that was probably a very expensive part of the house that they were very proud of. And I think I was feeling that.
You were picking
And
up on some more kinda like residual energy, do you think?
I think I was like as a 4 year old, I didn't know the term, but it's called empath, where you
Okay.
feel other people's emotions
Mhm.
in a certain object. And I think that's what I was picking up on. But, it got to the point where my mother wouldn't take me there because I would always,
Oh,
make over that wooden grain. I'd always talk about how happy that made me. And I think what I was doing was feeling, since you're closer to your relatives than you are to any other person out there in the paranormal field. And I
right.
think I was really getting a strong, I guess you could say, impression or emotional
Feeling.
feed from past relatives who really loved that. And I think they were even tickled to death that I liked it too. So, but
So
that was my first, I knew something was going on that was different, but I didn't know what. And it wasn't, my parents didn't care for that at all. They were very upset about that. So I pretty much went underground until close to retirement and didn't really talk about the paranormal field to anyone because as a forensic scientist, if you have to go and testify against, say, you test a sample and you have to go to court and support that testing results, and the defense
right,
knows that you're a paranormal researcher, they would say, how do you expect, the
right.
jury to believe what you're saying when you're seeing and hearing ghosts? And that would
Yeah,
be the
unfortunately,
that
in
would be the
our
stick they put on you.
business, shall we say, there's a lot of skeptics, right? And a lot of people tend to do this as a hobby or keep it secret and things like that. And that's part of the reason why I started doing this is to try to step out of the shadows and talk more about it. Because there's a lot of people out there who have a lot of experiences, but they're kind of shy to talk about it. And I also encourage people to come on and talk anonymously because there are a lot of people who are still stigmatized and things like that. But
Right.
Let's switch gears again, I guess, and talk about your books, Vampires Dead or Alive.
Yes, I pretty much been thinking about vampires since I was in middle school in the 60s. I used to come home and watch Dark Shadows on TV. And it was from what I know now, it was like a British sitcom, kind of like soap opera uh, concerning paranormal. And
Right.
I used to watch that, and that really sparked my interest on, how do vampires, dematerialize? How do vampires turn into like shape shifting into a bat or a werewolf? And that
Right, a
got me
lot of,
thinking.
supernatural powers, hey.
I wanted to know more. And within my book, Vampires Dead or Alive, I mainly look at traditional type of vampire characteristics. And I take those characteristics and compare it to, is this a characteristic of a dead person, or is this a characteristic of a living biological being? And I
And
go
from a
through each.
forensic standpoint, I bet you have an interesting eye on this.
Yes, I go through. I think there's about what I don't know, 14 chapters in the book. It's a short book. It's less than like 50 pages, but I find people usually like to read short books better. And it's not a lot of glamour. It's mainly just the meat and potatoes. You'll learn something new in each chapter. It'll be the same old characteristic, but you'll learn something new as I explain that characteristic. And I kind of look at that characteristic, as to whether it's more like a dead person or more like a biological living being. And I also look at how I feel a vampire do the things they do. How
So
can a vampire shapeshift? You know, and I
so
come
what's
up
your
with.
biggest kind of takeaway that you want people to get from the book? Like, say, for example, the shapeshift part, do you go into the anatomy and physiology of it in a forensic way?
Well, I would say I look at why they're shape shifting and or how they shape shift, and I think somehow they have to use some type of powerful force or energy to bend time, and I think they actually go back to a time. I believe that our souls are recycled, so I think right now my soul might be in a human being, but I might pass away, and there might be 10 years that my soul is just in a electrical energy state since you can't create or destroy matter. So if a vampire wants to dematerialize, they just go back to a time in their lifeline when they were just a soul and then they dematerialize immediately. But they would have to use some type of strong energy to bend space and time and to bend space and time just for themselves, not for everyone in their immediate environment. And that's
Right.
what they do. And I think, probably at one time I was a wolf. Probably at one time I was probably a bat. And as a vampire, if I had the ability to have a very small, dense black hole where I could only bend space and time just for me, then I would go back to a time where I was a bat and then I could immediately turn into a bat, shapeshift
So you
into a
think
bat.
when they turn into a bat, that would use less energy because it's a smaller, biological creature?
No, you're bending space and time back to when you were a bat. So that would still take the same amount of energy, no matter what type animal you turn into, because you need
Okay.
a lot of energy to actually bend space and time.
Yes, I would imagine 100% you would, for sure. Makes me think about Skinwalker Ranch with Travis and them are looking at. I mean, that really does look like some kind of a black hole or something over there. Isn't that
Well, I think
strange?
anyone with a forensic background, I even talk about like mutations and genetics of bats, and how all of us as human beings might have a genetic mutation which might allow us to actually pass away and in the comfort of our coffin regenerate and become living again if someone was to open up our coffin. Now,
Do you
this
think
has only
that's
happened.
why? Well, I was just going to say, do you think that's why the Egyptians went through such a big process and mummification of the body?
No, because mummification of the body, there's no way you could biologically come back to life. The only way you could come back to life if your body is left undisturbed, no embalming. If you embalm a person, all those chemicals, you're not going to
Yeah,
come back to life. But I think before the Civil War, when people were just buried as they are and allowed to deteriorate or rot or whatever you want to call it, I think that the people that had the certain genetic mutation who were allowed just to be in their coffin were almost like in a deep coma, and they were allowed to heal on their own. But you won't know that until someone like a grave robber who's robbing their grave for whatever valuables they were buried with, or robbing their
right.
grave to
Mhm,
take their body and sell them to a medical school,
mhm.
back during the
They
18 or
did do that then,
1700s.
didn't they?
Yes.
Mhm,
If they were able to rob a grave that happened to be a person with this mutation to have a gene to be a vampire, and what I mean by a vampire is to actually heal while you're dead and come back to life once your coffin is open. Because these vampires, they were almost like an animal who hibernates. They need less food, less water.
right.
In
Like a
this
bear.
case, no food,
Bear
no water,
hibernates, and a lot of
and very
animals
less
hibernate.
oxygen.
Yes.
So when a grave robber came along, that gave him an opportunity to reanimate. So,
Interesting.
it's illegal to do it, but if we had some type of experiment where we could go back and open up all the graves before 1850 when they started using embalming fluid, I wonder how many of those individuals would come back to life.
But Keith, that brings another question. Is that why there's so much activity in like the Gettysburg areas and all those areas on the battlefields where those bodies they weren't embalmed, like they were just naturally died and went into the ground, and is that why there's those places are more active? Because
Well,
their bodies had been
has
touched by chemicals, right?
I don't think it has anything to do with my theory of vampires. I think that more
Mhm.
less has to do with the emotional stress.
Oh, that too, yeah.
Anytime you have a strong emotional response to
Imprint.
either being killed or watching other people die, I think it leaves like an imprint memory of residual energy. And I think most of what people are finding up in Gettysburg is residual energy. I only went there a couple times when I was a little kid with my grandparents, and I think my grandparents and some of their friends. And we never got out. We just rode around. And as an empath,
I was just gonna
the whole
ask you,
time
you must have felt a lot when you were there.
the whole time I was in the area, I just wanted to get out of there. I was
Yeah.
sick to my stomach. I felt horrible. They asked me if I wanted to get out, and I said no, I want to go home. So, and I didn't realize at that time that that was anything to do with paranormal. I just thought I was having a bad day, but I'm not sure if I would want to go up there and like on a vacation and do paranormal research. Because if I felt as bad as I felt as a child, I wouldn't want to do it. It wouldn't be any enjoyment for me. And
Right.
when I do paranormal research, like the Hayes House, I usually go to a place where it was well loved. Uh, the Hayes House had only had two owners from like 18, correction, 1908 up until 1995. So when you do paranormal research there, you're getting a lot of energy from the first two families. And I did not know how the first family who built the Hayes house in 1908, the Buck family, I didn't know how they used each room. So the first chapter of the Hayes house is just about the Buck family. And then after that, I go about looking at each room, how the I write how the history of how the Hayes family used it, which they purchased the Hayes house in 1942. And I also have like a second part as to my actual transcripts of the paranormal research that I do, the equipment that I have, what I heard, what I saw, what data I received, and then there's a third part where I do an analysis of what I think that data meant, who said it, and but right now the Hayes House is not in print any longer. It's still available as ebook, but I'm probably gonna in the future possibly reprint the Hayes House into maybe three or four much smaller books with the same, pretty much the same information, the same text, but add more pictures and make it more friendly to someone who just doesn't want to sit there and read for a couple weeks or
Now
whatever.
you
Because it
also do
originally it's a 340-page book.
okay. Well, yeah, some people like big books, you know. Now you also
Not many.
do some investigations. You're also a paranormal investigator, and on YouTube you do paranormal short sessions. Do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Yes, I've been on YouTube, I guess, since about March of 2021, and I had some older videos that I was able to put on there from when I was doing paranormal research at the 1880 Victorian in St. Augustine, and that was from uh, 2020. So,
Right.
and there's a long story about that. I had for a year I had lost all of the photos and videos that I had did because my phone just got very hot to touch and it malfunctioned when I was in St. Augustine. And, you know, the phone that I had was a $200 phone. So I was upset at the ghosts and spirits and I kind of blamed it on them. And then a year later, I thought, maybe it wasn't them. They're these, I'm trying to think, nickel ion batteries. I don't know, lithium nickel ion
Vampires.
batteries. Sometimes they will get very hot on their own if there's a problem with the battery. And I
Yes.
thought, you know what? I yelled at those ghosts and spirits and tried to kick them out of the house because I had to pay $200 for a phone. Maybe I was
Uh,
wrong. So I apologized. I apologized to the ghosts and spirits and said, look, maybe I was wrong. Maybe you did nothing wrong. Maybe I was wrong for trying to kick you out of the house.
okay.
The next morning, this was before I went to bed. One night, about the same time that I started the on YouTube, which is either March or April of 2021. The next morning, I got up and I looked at my cell phone. My storage was maxed out. And I said, that's impossible. I looked all the pictures from the 1880 that were on my old phone that I had lost, and some of the videos were there.
Oh, interesting. So
So,
they brought
yeah.
them back. They helped you out a bit.
And just because I apologized, so maybe I was
Well,
wrong.
that's the
Maybe it
thing,
was a
when
defective battery in the
you
phone.
mentioned something that's really important, Keith, is respect. When you're dealing with the paranormal, that's paramount and
Yes.
number one. A lot of people do a lot of provoking and things like that, but I think respect is definitely number one. Do you have any tips and tricks for when you go investigating?
Well, I like ghosts of spirits that are like me, good, kind people. At least I think I'm good and kind. And I try to go to places that were well loved, like houses where families had owned the house for a long time. If you do that and you zero on someone who had lived there for 30 or 40 years, you're going to get either residual energy or an intelligent ghost communicating with you. And when I go to a graveyard, I just try to, look for whoever's available. You might go to a tombstone. Ghosts and spirits can travel at the speed of light. Why would they hang out at the place where they were buried every day. Some of them
Right.
may not be there. So I try to go to the graveyard and just ask who is available to talk to me, because there might be someone there available to talk to you, and you might not find their tombstone if you walk around for a couple hours, depending on how large the graveyard is. So I find just trying to be open minded and treat the ghost of spirit the way you would treat a living person that you're talking to on the street. And I find that most ghosts of spirits, if you can touch on something that they are interested in, say, like if you want to talk to the ghost or spirit that built the house that you're in, well, tell them how beautiful that house is. Tell them how happy you are that they built that house because now you're in it and you're able to enjoy it. Even if you're just at Airbnb, for a couple nights,
I
tell
agree.
them
I
that.
find there's a
You
lot
usually
more
will get a
activity.
response.
Yeah, when you talk to them like a normal person, you know how some people go, "Oh, if you're here, move this. Oh, if you're here, do that." Well, they get bored of that, right? I mean, if you talk to them like normal, and actually, when you throw humor in it, I find that they react more. Because we did some investigations, just during the Christmas season, just did impromptu things. And we found a lot more activity when we added humor and just, had a normal conversation with them. There was this one house that they really wanted us to go in there. And, one of our investigators had this silly hat on, and, we were getting hits all over the place on our EVP and on the talkbacks on the spirit box. I know you use Ovulus, right? That's one of your favorite tools to use.
Yes.
Did you want to talk about that?
Yes, I like the Obelisk 5B. And sometimes when I go to places, I'll just be bombarded by words. There'll be so many ghosts and spirits that want to get in information that it'll make no sense to me. And that happened to me at different places. I'm trying to think. A couple days at the Chestnut Street Cemetery in Apalachicola, where I've done extensive 1 hour paranormal short sessions, probably off and on for the last 3 years. And it also happened to me a couple of times at the 1880 Victorian in St. Augustine, Florida. So I find that if you have a reputation for being the type of person that respects ghosts and spirits and gives them a level playing field, you don't come off as they're the haunting problem in the house, because I don't think any person wants to be labeled as the problem of the house. So if
Right.
you come across as just wanting to communicate with them, I think you're going to get more ghosts and spirits to communicate. But at times, even I would have to sit down with maybe 100 words, and that's been given to me back to back on the Obelisk 5B, and try to figure out, like, well, is there five ghosts, and is every fifth word go to this sentence, or is every sixth word, or is there seven ghosts? So it could take hours to try to figure out, you know, how many ghosts are talking to you. But I think it's better if you go someplace and just get a couple words, and those words actually make sense. And a lot of times, the ghosts and spirits will tell me something about myself. Like there's an organization that helped me out with a feral cat that I have, because she was a mother cat and she was having kittens about every 3 months, and they're called St. George Island cat allies, and I was
Okay.
able to borrow a cage from them to catch her. So, you know, I gave them not a whole lot of money, but some money,
Hmm.
and as a donation. And then after that, I went to the Chestnut Street Cemetery, and I got the word. I don't know whether I think it was donation. So
Oh,
they knew,
okay.
the Ghost of Spirits knew that I had donated to the St. George Island uh,
For the
pet
cats, yeah.
allies or cat
Okay.
allies. So
Nice.
sometimes you'll get, if you do something like when I changed and went from one house to another, I rent. So, the first day I rent, when I went to the Chestnut Street Cemetery, I got rented, as if they say, well, we know you rented a new house.
Spirit
So a
knows,
lot of
don't
times
they, Keith?
they'll just they'll tell you something about yourself.
Yes,
So they let you know that they're intelligent just by letting you know they know something about you. And I
yes.
think it's important to let ghosts and spirits ask you questions, and you have to be very careful what questions you ask because I think people were very private 100, 200 years ago. If you asked them how they die,
Yes, yes.
they might say, well, it's none of your business that I died with cancer. And they might not
Right.
want to answer you. And I
As
know some
above, so
people today,
below, right? Yes. Mhm.
I've had people in my own family that I didn't know anything about their health because they were just that private.
Mhm.
And so you have to be careful what you ask. Some ghosts and spirits might not be comfortable telling you were they rich or were they poor. They might just ignore you, like, well, that's none of your business. So try to ask
Right.
questions that you wouldn't mind answering yourself. And sometimes what I will do, I would just tell them, my favorite color is blue. What is your favorite color? That way it's not a one-way street. And I think that way ghosts and spirits feel more comfortable with you.
I think you're right. Recently we were at an investigation and it said I was poor. And that day, I think we were all dressed up for some kind of outing or holiday outing. You have your all your tattoo and jewelry and all this and that. And it said rich. And then it started saying about different things that people were wearing. And then it said I was poor. And I thought, oh, well, maybe they don't want to talk to us because back then the class was a thing.
Yeah,
So I kinda said, "Oh, no, we're just, dressed up to go to a party or something, you can talk to us." And then they started talking. They started like you said, they started asking us questions. It was very interesting.
that's good. Well, I
Yeah,
noticed that today in Florida, when I speak with older individuals, and I'm close to 70, so when I speak to people older than me, uh, they say, "Well, I didn't talk to that gentleman because he was a class above me." So that was still going on in Florida, and I think it still goes on today because people will look at me and they'll say, "You'll talk to anybody." And as a paranormal researcher, yeah, I'll talk to anybody dead or alive. You
that's
have
right.
to, otherwise,
Yeah,
you wouldn't have much to talk about when you go
right.
and do your paranormal researches.
No,
But
I was gonna switch gears again with you and go back to the vampires. From your book, is there anything that you want folks to have as a takeaway from your book as a main theme that you'd like people, to take with them?
well, I've read Chariots of Fire, um, the book from the 1960s. I'm trying to think if I got the title right. Uh, it was a book about all different things. I guess you could say paranormal, non-paranormal,
Right.
uh, but it was very groundbreaking at the time. I think it came out in the late '60s, early '70s, and I think
Mm,
my book is very groundbreaking when it comes to looking at vampires from a different angle.
okay.
So if you read my book and you're very set on your ways, you might be disturbed about it. But I think each and every one of us pretty much has a little bit of vampire in all our blood. And if given the right opportunity to be close to death or mistakenly buried alive, we might actually be able to heal ourselves in a coma. So I really think that's something that people should take heart in. And I think that vampires were probably extraterrestrials. Who else could survive? Who's tough enough to survive long space travel? And if you can, utilize whatever power they have to go into a coma, what a better way to travel for a long period of time if you're in a coma and you're not
Well,
really bored or miserable or you get,
It's
stuck in a
interesting that
spacecraft.
you mentioned the word coma because from a medical standpoint, as you know, now a lot of times we use to induce comas to help the
Yes,
body heal.
yes, and
So
it helps the brain too.
yeah, there's something to it, right?
Yes, and I look at different theories on how the body could heal itself while in a coma. There might be certain vibrations that cause healing, and the body might be able to tap into certain vibrations which will help the body heal. And I will say this: not everyone. If you were like uh, blown to pieces, you're not going to be able to, even if you have the vampire gene to be able to heal yourself while buried alive. You're not going to be able to heal yourself. If you're burned beyond recognition, it's not going to work. If you are death by exposure to a radioisotope, it's not going to work. But if you die of certain causes and your body's left intact and no harmful chemicals, like you're not mummified or you're not in, no one uses embalming fluid, I think there's a chance that you could within your coffin heal yourself spontaneously. And if given a chance to someone open up your coffin, you'll reanimate. But I don't think you would reanimate until someone open up your coffin. So I guess that would be a plus for the grave robbers,
Okay,
of the
so in the future
1800s.
now, should people be expecting you to come back, Keith? Are you going to try it?
No, I'm cheap. I'm going to be cremated. So sorry. But I'm always available to anyone once I'm dead. If somebody wants to communicate with me, I'm always available, and I'm always willing to communicate to anyone who's still alive after I pass
Your
away.
energy will still be with us. And that's interesting, and we talk about that because right now the I guess we call it metaphysical and energy, and about high energy versus low energy. A lot of people are talking about that more and more, it seems.
Well, that's what our soul is. It's just electromagnetic energy. And from physics, you can't create or destroy energy. So
That's right.
once we pass away, that's what we still are. We're still electromagnetic energy. And I really believe that at one time we were only electromagnetic energy, that we were intelligent life, but we were just electromagnetic energy. And probably an enemy trapped us into a biological body so they could get us to do work or something they didn't want to do. That's one of my theories.
That's
So read the
interesting.
book. I think you will find the book to be short and sweet and full of a lot of new information and angles about vampires that you would never have thought of. And that's the feedback I've got from people who read my book. They would say, your book is short, but my God, you have a lot of new ideals about vampires and a lot of things you thought about that I would have never thought about. And that's the reason why I wrote the book, because it's fresh, new material about vampires. And I was always wondering, why don't anyone write about the stuff I think about? So anyway,
Now, is there anything that you want to say to folks on where they can find your book and both of them?
well, both the Vampires Dead or Alive and the Haste House Ghost for People 2 are available ebook on Kindle. Now, the only book that's available and paperback on Amazon and other places where good books are sold is Vampires Dead or Alive. So check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. My YouTube channel is called Paranormal Short Sessions by Keith Evans, and I'm also on Facebook and Instagram.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for being on the show with us today, Keith. I really enjoyed having you on today, and I
Thanks
hope
for
you
having
stay.
me.
Oh, thank you. And I really hope you stay warm over there in Florida. I know it's you're not used to all the snow over there.
I'm not used to cold weather either.
No, nobody likes cold weather.
Not
Well,
since I lived up north, and I was so happy to go to Florida because we didn't have cold weather here.
well, thanks again so much for being on Paranormal NL podcast. We really enjoyed having you on the show. Everybody, follow Keith Evans and go check out his books, Vampires Dead or Alive and The Hayes House. You won't regret it. You'll love him. I'm going to peace out now with a little bit of music. And thank you so much.